Mr. Jones, several years ago there was an update to the comprehensive plan. And as a part of that process, residents were asked about what jobs make our city's economy successful. The response overwhelmingly was a range of fields, including retail and healthcare. With that citizen input in mind, how do you plan to implement that feedback citywide, specifically around the Texas Parkway, Cartwright Road corridors, which we've been talking about today?
Well, I think, just leveraging up those opportunities around retail. I can tell you that the corridor right now has a wide plethora of classes in terms of retail. You've got what we refer to in the industry as A retail tenants, you've got B scale retail tenants, and then you got some C retail tenants and shopping centers. All of those coming together really gives a diverse class today. But what I see when I look at the planning efforts that took place before is really what people want is I call it a new era of retail where you got a different level of experience. So what I intend to do is to work with our planning department and planning professionals to go along that corridor from an investment standpoint and see, how do we create a sense of place that's unique to Missouri City. I remember being in Cincinnati, Ohio, when I headed up development there, and we were working in the Walnut Hills area, which is a really diverse neighborhood, and residents asked, about the approach there, and I always think about, every community has a unique sense of place about it, and when you think about, for example, in Seattle, you think about the fish pier in Seattle. Everybody talks about, you have pictures on Instagram of stars going there and folks throw a fish at them, but that's a thing that becomes a nomenclature about that community. It's a sense of place that's unique to it. In Huddle, we had hippos. It was a sense of place to it. In Cincinnati, we had a sense of place that was derived, whether it was in the sports and entertainment district that I worked on with the banks or in Walnut Hills around their neighborhood. We have to develop what's our niche sense of place and here in Missouri City. And whether it's around fresh foods, whether it's around seafood, whether it's around medical, whatever it is. And so my goal over the next 90 days is to really get close and hear from the residents what they think the needs are, and then also pay attention to the data and the demographics, and then translate that into a vehicle that can be packaged and sold to a market dynamic that changes the storyline about what Missouri City is, but also to what their corridor is, in a way where we can attract a diversity of business and start to build a sense of place and class around that. And the only way that's going to happen is by empowering people and empowering investors who are there, our small business owners. Since I've been on board, I've had business owners reach out, and I've had an opportunity to go talk to some of them, and some of them have shared with me just their thoughts, particularly with dealing with COVID and everything. But the thought about having an entertainment venue so that we in Missouri City didn't have to leave here to go and entertain. One of the things that's interesting is that during COVID, the big lesson learned was, one of the big lessons learned was that, your sales tax actually went up. So that tells you that the community actually, if given an opportunity to shop here, they will stay here. And so, the foot traffic trends we refer to in the real estate marketplace has changed because of that dynamic. So, I'm looking at how do we take this tragic story about COVID and make it a great opportunity for Missouri City. And I had an old football coach one time say to me, problems are opportunities for greatness. And so understanding what that greatness is that comes out of that, the fact that this experience that we've had is going to end up bringing us closer together as a community, and is going to end up propelling us in a better way forward. But how we do that is going to be understanding what has propelled people and what do they like about staying home and shopping. When your sales tax goes up the way it did here, there's a reason, because they still could have went and driven somewhere else, but they decided to stay home. And so I want to give people an opportunity to be a part of a participatory process where we can start to really value and understand those advantages of efficiencies that have been gained through this experience, so that we can translate that into opportunity for growth and opportunity for entrepreneurs in our community, which, you know, we have a lot of people who work out of their homes and everything else, to grow their businesses at home, and to really be a part of the experience of what the future looks like. I mean, and taking all those things that has been discussed and learned. I mean, the city has been planning and looking at this corridor for some time. But what I want to do is take what's been looked at and then add layers to it from a market dynamic standpoint that allows us as a community to go out and sell our idea, not just to the region, but to the world. And in today's market with social media and everything else, you know, you can sit here in this building and have a conversation in China. You can sit here in this building and have a conversation in Wall Street. And so how do we connect Wall Street with Main Street and help our investors here and entrepreneurs here develop at home? And that's going to be the goal and the niche about what we do. And at the center of all that is identifying what's that sense of place that's unique to Missouri City that we can birth and carry outside of the community. And I think what I bring to the table is just a new, fresh eye, and to be able to look at it a little differently and to translate that look-see to the market space. And that's what I intend to do.
So, Stacy, before we move on, I want to bring up two things that Mr. Jones mentioned. One was Missouri City identifying a niche as well as sense of place. One of the things that our city has struggled with is being branded for something. When you think of Missouri City, what do you think of? I've been several places, and when I ask people, do they know Missouri City, they usually call out a neighboring city and say, "Oh, you're next to them." It's nothing. It's never a mention of what Missouri City is known for. We have a tagline, "The Show Me City," but very few people know the tagline. And the tagline doesn't refer to anything. So we've tasked you with branding the city. So what are your thoughts on some opportunities for actually branding the city?
Well, I think, Mayor, what we got to do is have a community discussion about the history of the city, and really take the fabrics of the history of the city around food, culture, and I always say opportunity, investment opportunity. I mean, we have one of the best in Fort Bend. I mean, we have one of the best school districts in the country, and so all those things, you know, it's got to come together really to identify that unique brand. Mm-hmm. And and I think that gets into not only that, but one of the things I didn't mention is our wonderful parks. And we got to have a discussion about our park systems and how great they are around here too. But having a discussion from a community-wide angle perspective and being able to get that input and focus down and narrow in really gives you a brand. You can get to a brand where your community is proud of, and it becomes magnanimous. As your residents in the city go and conduct business around the globe, they can say, "Hey, you know, I'm from Missouri City, and this is what we're good at." Well, I want to understand what this is what we're good at, so we can translate that into a brand, a focus, and a name. And that happens through a community participatory process that lead us to that. And that's what I'm going to be excited about being a part of doing.
Yeah, and the average age here is 37 in Missouri City. With that being said, what are your thoughts around us creating a smart city or opportunities for us to be known as a smart city? What do you think about
Well, I
that?
tell you, it's a great opportunity. And one of the things that a lot of people may not know is that Missouri City has already begun doing some things, like, for example, all LED lighting systems. Some of the things that council has been a part of making sure it happens. A lot of cities have not taken that step yet in terms of energy efficiency. That's something that the council has already allowed to have happen. But from a smart city perspective, getting into things like, Wi-Fi, you've got some cities now that are on Wi-Fi. The day and age, for example, for cities using cable television has changed. These days, if you got a smart TV and you've got Wi-Fi, then you don't need to have that big bill and bad technology. And so we're going to have a conversation about fiber, about all those things that from a futuristic standpoint and being a modern city, you've got to have. As we are growing, particularly as the city is growing, you're going to have an opportunity, Mayor, that as these roads are built, to decide, should I be putting black fiber in so that I can expand my Wi-Fi capability and my technology capability into the future for our children. And a lot of towns and communities don't have that opportunity because they're not experiencing that kind of growth. Well, you're going to have that opportunity. Now we got to translate it into results of getting it done, and that's the discussion that I'm be wanting to engage in.
And there's also some very low-lying fruit, such as self-serving kiosks, so people, they don't have to go into a building with this pandemic and pay their bills and get assistance from the city. So those are opportunities that we can absolutely.
I'm glad she brought that up because, a lot of the things that we've learned with this pandemic is, if citizens can be able to do things electronically, it really is more efficient for them, and it provides a higher degree of customer service. So, getting kiosks so that people can pay, being able to they got apps today that allow for you to be able to, pay your municipal bill sets and all those other things, and also to engage into the civic center and the court. And so we're going to want to test all those technology things. We've got a good director, I think, of technology. He's got a big vision for the city. What we've got to do is we've got to get the community engaged and come back and have a smart city initiative in this city that ends up translating into real savings and opportunity.
You mentioned us going on listening tours, and one of the things that we're doing is partnering with a store that is right here, a business right here in our city, which is Harvest Market. And we will be on their trolleys. During this pandemic, their response to helping the community was to create a mobile grocery store. So they literally took a trolley and retrofitted it with a full grocery store. So we will be taking those trolleys around the city so that we can introduce them to the community.
I just want to circle back really briefly to the comprehensive plan and the feedback that we received from citizens. They said they're willing to increase economic development incentives such as tax abatements to see the economy grow. What are your thoughts about tax abatements and other available resources that can also help to impact our economy?
I think it's tremendously important when you are reimagining a corridor. Oftentimes, I tell people there's a big difference between doing what I call green development and redevelopment. Green development is when you find farmland and you're going out and you're plowing ahead and you're developing an area. Redevelopment is when you have to take an area and then reimagine it and rebuild it. Oftentimes there's an additional cost that developers will experience in that. When you look at the Texas Parkway in the Cartwright corridor, that is going to need to have some incentives to allow for that risk to be underwritten. Oftentimes what I say about incentives is you're doing is you're allowing the risk taker to take a little bit of the taxes that he would normally pay and reinvest it back into the community. And long term, you're going to get it back to you. So, I think it's a way of leveraging up opportunities, but at the same time, bad deals are not made better by tax incentives. Instead, good deals are blossomed and promise our ability to allow risk takers to reinvest, reimagine in your community. And it's just time to do a little of that in those corridors so we can make a difference.
And is that leveraging up concept something that we can look forward to you sharing more with our business owners, managers, our stakeholders, so that they can hear from you directly how important that is and what role they will play in that process?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the mayor talked about it. We're not only going to be going on listening tour, but her and I also too are going to be on these trolleys. And what we hope to get is from people ideas and thoughts about what are the challenges they're faced with in terms of growing their business, and what that does is that gives us an opportunity to hopefully articulate a plan to move us ahead, and then we'll be communicating that and getting feedback from them, not only in our conversations but also at the council level. Right, we've got a very engaged city council, and I've had the pleasure of sitting down with some of our council members and taking tours of their districts and really hearing the excitement they got in their voice about different projects and initiatives that's happening. And the mayor and I have had an opportunity to engage and look at that from a citywide perspective, and she's got a dynamic vision about how all these things come together. But what we're going to do is we're going to be able to hear from the community and then be able to come back with a plan that addresses their needs from a specific perspective. And that's what I'm going to be doing over the next 90 days and presenting that to the council and getting feedback from the community.
I know our community, we've talked about tax abatements quite a bit. It's been a sore subject for some residents because they believe we're just giving away the kitchen sink to get people into the city. There are other opportunities for economic development than tax abatement. And Mr. Jones brings that knowledge to the table on being able to offer those things when we are inviting companies into our city. So I just wanted to mention that.
And I'm glad you did, because an example of that, Mayor, would be just expediting permitting. I mean, oftentimes, with people in government, what we have to realize is that time is money and money is time. So from an investor standpoint, from a business standpoint, from just a resident standpoint, I got to tell you, a story where I had a resident call me. He was talking about they wanted to put a pool in, and he's like, man, this pool is costing me money because I got to wait on a permit. I mean, I got to pay this guy to go back and do another plan. So what we've got to do is streamline our permitting, because take an example like that, it's an incentive for that property owner to know that his fee and his cost for installing a pool is going to be a lot cheaper, because when he comes to a city that has an efficient process for permitting, it's going to be through in a timely way where he's not having to double dip in terms of his cost and expense. So, when I think about incentives, it's not just about, taxes. It's about, how we operate, how we think, how we focus, and how we deliver product at the end of the day. And that's a service that we deliver every day in terms of a product. And we're going to be looking at how do we streamline that. The mayor and the city council has, asked, for example, I know in this budget that we start to articulate how do we better do like what's called a one-stop shop, where, when residents or businesses come in, they get an opportunity in one sitting to get feedback, so that they're not having to continue coming back to City Hall, and they get an opportunity to be to manage their permitting process in a way that doesn't cost them more money than they should be required to pay. So all those things about being entrepreneurial inside, about how we think as an organization, that those are the kinds of things, to the mayor's point, that I'm looking at, and that I'm going to be coming to council with too, saying, hey, look, here's some opportunities we can get better. I know our staff, we got a fantastic staff, and they've already come to council with some opportunities. And council has also too said, look, here's some things we see that we've got to do better, and we're looking at how we augment that to make things better. But people should know that, you know, when you're incentivizing not only a company but a resident to invest, because oftentimes people, when they hear that, they think about business. But, you know, there's incentive also too for residents. You know, a lot of residents in town are making improvements to their home, would like to make more improvements to their home, and we've got to be able to make sure that we provide a good service to them from a customer service standpoint that allows for them to be able to do it in an efficient way.
Even though we've talked a lot about the Texas Parkway and Cartwright corridor, we are looking at the entire city and making sure that we are developing the entire city efficiently. One of the things that, you know, I tell people, especially having an urban planning background, I mean, first it's kind of like you have to stop the bleeding. And Texas Parkway and Cartwright have definitely been kind of the sore spots in our city. So it is our priority. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, we have opportunities going on all over the city at this moment, and I'm sure we'll be back to let the residents know as soon as we can what those opportunities are. But we aren't just focusing just on this part of the city. We are making sure that our entire city is working efficiently and developing efficiently.
And I will tell you, I know just today alone, I've been not only on phone conversations with the mayor, but with also some of my other council members in looking at projects that are not along the Texas Parkway, but are along Route 6 or along the other belts that are happening. There's some exciting stuff that's going on throughout this community, and we really truly have to appreciate all of them holistically. The reason that I looked at initially the Texas Parkway is because I think it's a main line to your heart. It runs right through the city, and so we've got to pay some attention there. But likewise, there's a lot of exciting stuff that's happening throughout the city that we are paying attention to, and that we are moving on. You know, and I know in the last few agendas, there's been items, and then in the future agendas for council, there's going to be other items that are not necessarily along the Texas Parkway, but holistically as a community, you know, we manage and grow, and we do it in a way where we're trying to add that diversity of growth, so that at the end of the day, our taxpayers, our residents, you know, if we can get a little higher commercial center base in the community, then it will offset some of their costs and deal with, the cost of taxes on their homes. So we're trying to balance that holistically across the city.